The autumn sun filtered through the canopy of trees along County Road 14, casting shifting patterns of gold and amber across the asphalt. It was the kind of perfect October afternoon that belonged in a painting until the red Audi's engine made a sound like metal grinding against metal, shuddered violently, and died. "No, no, no," Gabriella Chen muttered, guiding the car to the shoulder as steam began rising from under the hood. "Not now, not here." She sat for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel, feeling the universe's sense of ironic timing. She was CEO of Tech Vista Solutions, a cybersecurity firm she'd built from nothing into a company worth over $300 million. She commanded boardrooms, negotiated with venture capitalists, made decisions that affected hundreds of employees. But she couldn't fix a broken car engine on a rural highway 40 miles from the nearest city. Gabriella pulled out her phone. No signal. Of course not. This stretch of road between Seattle and her hometown of Millbrook had always been a dead zone. She'd forgotten that detail in the 15 years since she'd left her and never looked back. She stepped out of the car, her beige blazer and pencil skirt utterly impractical for a roadside breakdown. The air smelled of fallen leaves and approaching autumn rain. She popped the hood, stared at the smoking engine with complete incomprehension, and resisted the urge to kick the tire in frustration. This was supposed to be a quick trip. Drive to Millbrook for her father's retirement party, make an appearance, drive back. In and out in 24 hours. Minimal emotional damage. She'd specifically chosen to drive instead of flight to maintain control of her schedule, to have an escape route if things got uncomfortable. So much for control. Gabriella was debating whether to start walking when she heard the sound of another vehicle approaching. An old pickup truck, a primer gray with spots of rust, slowed and pulled over behind her car. Her first thought was relief. Her second was caution, a woman alone on a deserted road. But then the driver stepped out, and Gabriella's world tilted sideways. 15 years. It had been 15 years since she'd seen Ethan Torres, but she would have recognized him anywhere. The dark hair that had always been a little too long, the warm brown eyes, the way he moved with easy confidence. He was older now, broader in the shoulders, with the kind of face that had matured from boyishly handsome into something more substantial. He was wearing a brown polo shirt and work pants, and he hadn't recognized her yet. He was looking at her car, not at her face. "Car trouble?" he called, approaching with a friendly but professional distance. "I'm a mechanic. I can take a look if you'd like." Gabriella's throat had closed. When she didn't respond immediately, Ethan looked up, and she watched the recognition hit him like a physical blow. "Gabby?" His voice was barely a whisper. "Gabriella Chen?" "Hi, Ethan." Her own voice sounded strange to her ears, too high, too tight. "It's been a while." 15 years. He stayed where he was, as if movement might shatter whatever fragile moment this was. You look amazing." "Different, but amazing." Different was an understatement. The girl Ethan had known wore jeans and her mother's hand-me-down sweaters, her hair always in a messy ponytail. Now she wore designer clothes and professional makeup, her hair styled in a sleek high ponytail that cost more to maintain than she'd once spent on groceries. "You look good too," Gabriella said, and meant it. Ethan had aged in the way some men do, not losing youth but gaining character, lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often. An awkward silence stretched between them, filled with 15 years of unsaid things. "Your car," Ethan finally said, breaking the tension. "Do you want me to look at it?" "Please, if you don't mind." Ethan moved to the front of the Audi, and Gabriella watched his hands, as still capable, still confident, to move across the engine with practiced ease. Those hands used to hold hers, used to cup her face when he kissed her, used to trace promises on her skin that neither of them had been old enough to keep. "Radiator hose burst," Ethan said after a few minutes, "and I think your head gasket's blown. This car isn't going anywhere without the tow and serious repairs. Can you fix it?" "Eventually. Yeah, but not here on the roadside. We'll need to get it to a shop." He pulled out his phone. "I can call Danny's Towing. They're about 30 minutes out. Then I can drive you wherever you need to go." "I was heading to Millbrook, my father's retirement party." "Your dad's retiring?" "That's." Ethan paused, and Gabriella saw him doing the math. "Wow, time really has passed, hasn't it?" While they waited for the tow truck, they stood in that awkward space between the car and the road, not quite looking at each other, not quite looking away. "So you became a mechanic?" Gabriella said, more to fill the silence than because she didn't know. She'd kept tabs on Ethan over the years through social media, though she'd never commented, never reached out. She knew about the garage he owned, knew about a Torres Auto Repair, right on Main Street where the old hardware store used to be. Ethan was looking at the trees, not at her. "It's small, but it's mine. Good business. Good employees. I like it." "That's wonderful. You always were good with cars." Another silence, heavier this time. "I heard you got married," Gabriella said softly, and watched Ethan's expression shift to something sad. "I did, Amy." She was great, kind, funny, loved Millbrook. "We had a daughter, Sophie. She's 8 now." Ethan took a breath. "Amy died 3 years ago. Brain aneurysm. She went to work one day and never came home." Gabriella felt her heart crack. "Ethan, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. How would you? You haven't been back to Millbrook in 15 years. Not even for a visit." There was no accusation in his voice, just statement of fact. But Gabriella felt it like an accusation anyway. "I couldn't," she said quietly. After I left, coming back felt like going backward, like failing." Ethan finally looked at her directly. "Is that what I was? A failure you needed to escape from?" "No." "God, number." "Ethan, you were never a." Gabriella pressed her hands to her face. "This isn't the conversation to have on the side of a highway." "Maybe not," Ethan agreed, "but we're having it anyway. Because I spent 15 years wondering what I did wrong, wondering why you left her and never looked back, never called, never wrote, never gave me any explanation beyond that note that said you needed to find your own path." "You didn't do anything wrong," Gabriella said, and she was crying now, tears she'd held back for 15 years finally breaking free. "You were perfect, Ethan." "That was the problem. You were perfect and Millbrook was comfortable, and if I'd stayed, I would have stayed forever. I would have been your wife, had your kids, worked at my dad's store, and died never knowing what I could have become on my own. So you had to cut me out completely." "Not even a phone call in 15 years?" "Because I was afraid," Gabriella whispered. "Afraid that if I heard your voice, I'd come running back. Afraid that I'd give up everything I was trying to build because being with you felt better than any success I could chase, and I needed to know I could make it alone. I needed to prove to myself more than any that I was more than just the girl who got out of Millbrook by marrying well." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. "You thought I'd hold you back?" "I thought loving you would make me choose you over myself. And I'd spent 18 years being told by my family that I needed to be practical, stay close, not reach too high. I had to know I could reach higher, even if it meant losing you." "And did you?" Ethan asked. "Reach higher?" Gabriella laughed, a broken sound. "I built a company worth hundreds of millions. I've been on magazine covers. I live in a penthouse in Seattle. I date men with MBAs and trust funds. And I'm completely, utterly empty inside. So yeah, I reached higher. I'm just not sure it was worth the climb." The tow truck arrived then, preventing Ethan from responding. He handled the logistics while Gabriella composed herself, wiping away tears and rebuilding her professional mask. By the time the car was loaded onto the flatbed, she'd almost managed it. "Come on," Ethan said, gesturing to his pickup. "I'll drive you to Millbrook. We can figure out the car tomorrow." The drive was quiet at first, both of them processing what had been said, but gradually, carefully, they began to talk. Not about the past or the painful things, but about safer topics. Ethan told her about Sophie, about her love of books, her fear of thunderstorms, the way she still asked about her mother even though the memories were fading. "She's the reason I keep going," Ethan said. "Amy made me promise, before she died, as she had just enough time at the hospital to make me promise I'd take care of Sophie, that I'd make sure she knew she was loved, that I wouldn't drown in grief. So I've been trying to keep that promise." "You sound like a wonderful father." "I try. Some days are harder than others. Being a single dad isn't what I planned, but it's what I have, so I make it work." Gabriella told him about Tech Vista, about the long hours and constant pressure, about the satisfaction of building something from nothing, but also the loneliness of being at the top with no one to share it with. What about your family? Ethan asked. You said you're heading to your dad's party. How are your parents? Mom died 5 years ago. Cancer. I was in the middle of a major acquisition, so I didn't make it back in time. She died while I was on a plane from Tokyo. Gabriella's voice cracked. My dad's never forgiven me for that. Neither have I. Ethan reached over and squeezed her hand briefly. I'm sorry. By the time they reached Millbrook, the sun was setting, casting the small town in golden light. Nothing had really changed. The same main street, the same courthouse, the same park where she and Ethan had spent countless afternoons dreaming about futures that had never materialized. Where's the party? Ethan asked. The Millbrook Inn. But you don't have Toa. I know your dad. Gabby, I should pay my respects. Plus, Sophie's with my mom tonight. I have nowhere else to be. The party was in full swing when they arrived at the inn's event room filled with people from her father's workplace, old family friends, half the town it seemed. Her father, Richard Chen, stood in the center holding court, looking older than Gabriella remembered but still strong, still vital, until he saw her walk in with Ethan Torres. Then his expression hardened. Gabriella, he said, his voice carefully neutral. You made it. And you brought Ethan. What a surprise. My car broke down. Ethan was kind enough to help and give me a ride. How convenient. Richard's tone suggested he thought it was anything but. Ethan, good to see you. How's that garage of yours? Good, sir. Business is steady. I'm sure it is. Richard turned back to his daughter. Gabriella, can I speak with you privately? In a back hallway away from the crowd, Richard Chen didn't waste time on pleasantries. What are you doing? My car actually did break down, Dad. I didn't plan. I don't mean the car. I mean showing up with Ethan Torres after 15 years. Do you have any idea how this looks? How it will seem to people? Gabriella felt old anger rising. I'm 33 years old. I don't really care how it looks. You should. You're a CEO now. You have a reputation. Coming back to this town with your old boyfriend. He's not my boyfriend. He was kind enough to help a stranger on the highway. That's it. Is it? Richard studied her face. Because I remember how you were with him. How you lost all sense of perspective. You were going to throw away college. Throw away your future, to stay here and be his wife. That's not fair. I loved him, yes, but I left. I made the choice you wanted me to make. And look what you've built. You're successful, powerful, independent. Don't throw that away for nostalgia and a man who peaked in high school. He didn't peak, Gabriella shot back. He owns his own business. He's raising a daughter alone. He's respected in this community. Just because he didn't leave doesn't mean he didn't succeed. But he didn't leave. That's my point. You did. You became something. Don't regret that now because being home makes you sentimental. Gabriella left the conversation feeling hollowed out. She rejoined the party, plastered on her professional smile, made small talk with people who remembered her as Richard Chen's ambitious daughter. Ethan found her an hour later on the inn's back patio, staring at the stars. You okay? He asked softly. My dad thinks I'm making a mistake, being here with you. Are you? Gabriella turned to face him. I don't know. Am I? Ethan stepped closer. 15 years ago, you broke my heart. Gabby, you left me a note and disappeared. I was angry for a long time, then hurt. Then I met Amy, fell in love again, built a different life. I was happy. I'm glad, Gabriella whispered. You deserve to be happy. But here's the thing, Ethan continued. When I saw you today on that highway, my first thought after the shock was that some part of me had been waiting 15 years for that moment, for you to come back, for a chance to understand why you left. And now you understand? I think so. You left because staying felt like giving up. And I get that now. In a way I couldn't then. I was 20 years old and in love and couldn't understand why that wasn't enough. But love isn't always enough when you're trying to figure out who you are. It should be, Gabriella said sadly. Maybe, but it wasn't. And that's okay. You became who you needed to become. Ethan took her hand. But can I ask you something? Was it worth it? All the success and money and recognition, did it make you happy? Gabriella thought about her penthouse that echoed with emptiness. About business dinners where she smiled and said the right things while feeling nothing. About looking at her life from the outside and seeing success but feeling hollow. No, she admitted. I thought it would. I thought if I achieved enough, proved enough, I'd feel complete. But I just feel alone. Like I've been running so hard towards something that I forgot to look around and see if I actually wanted to get there. Then stop running, Ethan said simply. It's not that easy. Why not? You're the CEO. You make the rules. If you're unhappy, change something. Change what? My entire life? That's no to Gabby. Ethan cupped her face in his hands, the gesture so familiar it made her ache. I'm not asking you to give up your company or your success. I'm not asking you to move back to Millbrook and pretend 15 years didn't happen. I'm just asking what if you stopped running from the past and let yourself figure out what you actually want now? I don't know what I want, Gabriella whispered. Then stay for a few days. Figure it out. Your car needs repairs. A perfect excuse. Stay in Millbrook, see what it feels like now that you're not trying to escape it. Maybe you'll hate it and realize Seattle is exactly where you belong. Or maybe, he trailed off, maybe what? Maybe you'll remember why you loved it here once, why you loved me once, and maybe you'll realize that success doesn't have to mean being lonely. Gabriella stayed. She called her assistant, rescheduled meetings, and let herself exist in Millbrook time for the first time in 15 years. Ethan showed her around his garage, a clean, well-organized space where he clearly took pride in his work. She met Sophie, a shy 8-year-old with her father's eyes and a love of books that reminded Gabriella of herself at that age. You're the lady whose car broke down, Sophie said. Daddy says you and him were friends a long time ago. We were, Gabriella confirmed. Are you friends again now? I hope so. Over meals at the diner where they'd spent countless teenage hours, over walks through the park where they'd first kissed, Gabriella and Ethan rebuilt something. Not what they'd had up that was gone, belonging to younger versions of themselves, but something new. An understanding built on maturity and loss and the recognition that they'd both become different people. I need to tell you something, Gabriella said one evening as they sat on Ethan's porch while Sophie slept inside. I've been thinking about what you said, about stopping running. And I realized I built Tech Vista to prove I didn't need anyone, to prove I could make it alone. But proving something isn't the same as living. And I don't want to spend the rest of my life proving things anymore. What do you want? I want to feel something real. I want work that matters. Not just work that impresses people. I want. She took a shaky breath. I want to stop punishing myself for leaving you by never letting myself love anyone again. Ethan pulled her close. You don't have to punish yourself. You made the right choice for who you were then. But you can make different choices now. Over the following months, Gabriella restructured her life. She promoted her COO to CEO, kept her position as board chair, but stepped back from day-to-day operations. She bought a house in Millbrook, not giving up Seattle entirely, but creating a life that could exist in both places. And slowly, carefully, she and Ethan found their way back to each other. Not as naive 20-year-olds who thought love conquered all, but as adults who'd lived enough to know that love was a choice you made every day, not a feeling that swept you away. Sophie was cautious at first, protective of her father, wary of this woman who'd appeared in their lives. But Gabriella didn't rush, didn't try to replace Amy or force connection. She simply showed up for school plays and homework help and Saturday morning pancake until Sophie began to trust that she'd stay. Do you love my dad? Sophie asked one afternoon while they were reading together. I do, Gabriella said honestly. Is that okay with you? Sophie considered this seriously. I think so. Mom would want Daddy to be happy, and he's happy when you're here. But you have to promise you won't leave. Daddy's heart got really broken when Mom died. I don't want it to get broken again. I promise, Gabriella said. I left once before. I won't make that mistake again. 2 years after her car broke down on County Road 14, Gabriella and Ethan got married in the same park where they'd spent so many teenage afternoons. Sophie was the flower girl, tossing petals with enthusiastic precision. Richard Chen walked his daughter down the aisle, and though their relationship was still complicated, he began to accept that maybe his definition of success wasn't the only valid one. I was wrong, he told Gabriella before the ceremony. About Ethan, about this town, about what mattered. I wanted you to have everything I didn't: money, prestige, freedom. But I didn't realize I was teaching you to value those things over happiness. You weren't wrong to want more for me, Gabriella said, but you were wrong about what more meant. In her vows, Gabriella spoke about broken roads and second chances, about the journey away that taught her to appreciate home, about learning that success wasn't about how far you ran but about finding a place worth staying. 15 years ago, she said, looking at Ethan through tears, I thought leaving you was the bravest thing I could do. Today, I know that coming back is braver, that choosing you, choosing this life, choosing to stop running, that takes more courage than any business deal I've ever negotiated. You taught me that love isn't about giving up yourself, it's about finding yourself in someone else's eyes and liking what you see. Ethan's vows were simpler. You broke my heart once, and I thought that was the end of our story. But it turns out it was just the middle. Sometimes people need to leave to become who they're meant to be. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, they find their way home. Welcome home, Gabby. I never stopped loving you. I never will. Years later, when people asked Gabriella about her success story, the CEO who'd built a tech empire, she'd always add a coda about the breakdown that changed everything. I thought success meant never looking back, she'd say. But real success is knowing when to stop moving forward and start building something that lasts. My car broke down on a road I'd been avoiding for 15 years. And the person who stopped to help was the one I'd been running from all along. Turns out I wasn't running from him, I was running from the fear that needing anyone made me weak. But love doesn't make you weak, it makes you brave enough to stay. Sophie, now in college studying engineering, would add, my dad always says that some roads take you away and some roads bring you home. Sometimes they're the same road, you just have to be willing to turn around. And Ethan, gray now at the temples but still the man with capable hands and a generous heart, would simply smile and say, best breakdown I ever fixed. The car was totaled, but it brought me back everything I'd lost. Sometimes things have to fall apart before they can come together the right way. On quiet evenings, when Gabriella and Ethan sat on their porch watching Sophie laugh with friends, when the chaos of her former life felt like someone else's story, Gabriella would think about that autumn afternoon when her expensive car died on a forgotten highway. She'd thought she was stranded, lost, broken down in the worst possible place. She hadn't realized she was exactly where she needed to be, waiting for the one person who'd always known the way back home. Sometimes, she learned, the road back was just as important as the road away. Sometimes first love wasn't the practice round, it was the destination you'd been traveling toward all along. You just needed the courage to stop running and let yourself arrive.